sister Hex is more than a dream. Her touch will make you wish for death as you struggle and shake to find your last breath.
Oh my god, here we go! Yeah! So, oh, that's so cool. Back with another haunt video for the 2022 season, and this time I'm going back to Howl-O-Scream Orlando. This is the second year for this event, my second time going. In 2021, this was one of my favorite haunts that I did the entire year, and I'm gonna just preface this and be honest, I was not impressed this year. However, in the kind of aftermath of going, and I honestly delayed filming this for a little bit, A, to just kind of get my thoughts back together on it and not be maybe reactionary to how I felt. And then B, honestly, the day of going to the event, I was working with my friend Rob on some stuff for our booth at Spooky Empire, and I was welding, and I ended up getting a terrible sunburn on my face. It was, welding burn, because I was stupid and hadn't welded in a while and forgot how to do things safely and properly, so I didn't really want to film a video with my face just like a peeling sunburnt mess. But I'm kind of glad I did take that extra time to think about it a little more, because I bought my ticket for Howl-O-Scream Orlando, I think early September, late August, something like that. So well ahead of the event actually happening, or at least, the night that I went. And in that time, a hurricane passed through Central Florida. And I personally was pretty lucky with it. Up in Jacksonville here, we didn't get much of anything. I think I even mentioned that in my Howl-O-Scream Tampa video. This was the weekend after. But I kind of forget that Orlando did get a little worse of it than I did. And I'm kind of wondering now, going there, if part of my problem and the fact that a lot of things felt underpopulated and some bits of it may have been that it was just a hurricane and maybe some people had higher priorities than going and working as a scare actor. Like, that's completely understandable. So I'm gonna try to kind of give you my initial thoughts while I was there, and then I think I just want to keep that in the back of my mind through this, that some of this probably wasn't the fault of everything, but there's some bits as well that are definitely not excusable by a hurricane. I feel like saying that, I sound like this is gonna be like, oh, this is the worst event ever, there was terrible things that happened. No, I mean, it was just underwhelming. So one of the weird things with the Orlando event is that when you get in early, you basically get corralled into a small little section that has a kind of mini scare zone display kind of thing. There's a store, and there's a bar, and then some restrooms. So you can basically congregate here for a while, you get through security and you can go there, and it really kind of just feels like a way for them to make money off of you before letting you into the park. It's not like the Tampa one where you could actually get into the park itself a little bit at the end of the thing. I kind of feel like they should open that up. Maybe there's logistical reasons why they can't, but that's one of the things I think is kind of cool about the Tampa one, even if there are like a weird cutover period there as well. But on a relatively busy night, it seemed like they were struggling to kind of keep everybody in that area. It was getting pretty full. So once the event opens, you are basically forced to go through a scare zone to get into the rest of the park. And this one is Frozen Terror Alive in the Ice. This is, I don't know if it was the same name last year, but it is returning scare zone. A lot of the same props and everything were there. It's kind of a Thing meets zombie kind of looking thing, so it's very Antarctic based because there is like a Arctic, or maybe it's Arctic, not Antarctic, I don't remember. Alright, it says Arctic on the listing. So it is a kind of like snowy outpost base, and then people have been mutated. It looks really good. I feel like this is one of the scare zones where the actors were really into what they were doing. I think they did a good job. A lot of people making weird, creepy noises and stuff as well. It's also, I think, one of the scare zones where they have various things you could use to kind of create sparks on the ground and things like that, so that adds to it as well. If I remember correctly, I think this was all the same props from last year. So this kind of spits you off into a main hub. There are 2 houses down here, and I decided since it had just opened up, I didn't want to do the first 2 houses you run into. I wanted to go a little further into the park and try to do some of the ones that maybe would have a shorter line. To get to the back of the park, I had to go through another scare zone, and this one was Deadly Ambush. Another returning one from last year, a lot of the same set pieces. It was kind of supposed to be like a sleepaway camp or a camping resort, and it's being overtaken by werewolves. Or at least I'm pretty sure they were supposed to be werewolves. This was kind of underpopulated a little bit. I think every time I went through it, I feel like last year I had a lot of cool interactions with the scare actors, like they would kind of play up the storyline and things. This time it was more of what I would consider standard, like, HHN scare zone fare. You know, where people come up and be like, "Wah!" Like, okay, yeah, I mean, it's just a jump scare, I guess, which is normal. So I feel like I shouldn't be so harsh on it, but in a weird way, it was just kind of lackluster in that, like I said, last year, knowing that they had people playing up more things, and maybe they were, and I just didn't get any of that in my walkthroughs of it, but I was definitely missing that this year. Watch out! Howl-O-Scream Orlando, like the Tampa one, does a really good job of like pulsing people through the house where you are not with a group or with a conga line or whatever. I mean, if you have your own group, you're with that group. But for the most part, I was going through by myself. So the first house I went into was Deadly Vines, Root of All Evil. Another returning one, you kind of go through like a greenhouse and you go through these various kind of areas where it's just covered in like plant life and stuff. And the costumes are a little bit old-timey and creepy, like ghosts going around the vines and everything. And herein lies my problem. These houses were not memorable at all. The first 2 houses I went to actually felt like the same house with slight re-themes to each other. Which is weird because they were in the same location they were last year, these 2 at least. And it felt like they might have been the same, but for whatever reason, where it was really cool last time, it felt underdressed this time. There were a lot of areas where I was noticing like the building I was in and not the haunted house elements. Like you could see like random windows and stuff around, and granted it was still daylight a little bit going through this first one especially, so I don't know if that contributed, but I figured you could block out some windows, right? It's not the hardest thing to do in a haunted house. It felt like a lot of just like walking into very dark rooms with like drapery items sitting down in front of you, having to push through those, and maybe there's a scare actor, maybe there's not. And I felt more often than not there weren't scare actors, but once again, like I said, this could be because of the hurricane or something like that. I should also say this was a Sunday night, so it was a weekend. So not like I was going on a day that, you know, would be a more off day, I guess. The next house I went into was another returning one, Captain's Revenge, Drowned in Darkness. And honestly, this one I feel like could have been the same house as Deadly Vines. Like the layout felt very similar. Once again, I think it was a lot of same stuff from last year, but it just felt underpopulated with scare actors. It felt a little underdressed, and it relied on basically those same, you know, walking into a dark room with things obscuring your vision, and then maybe there was a scare actor, but it felt like a lot of times there was not. The next scare zone up was Witchcraft Bayou, yet another returning one. This one I really do enjoy visually. They theme it really well. They have a lot of like voodoo shacks. I feel like they upgraded some of these a little bit, maybe not a lot. Honestly, it is reminiscent of the one in Tampa, but they give it its own flair. This one definitely feels a lot more watery, I guess, which makes sense with SeaWorld. I don't know, Busch Garden ones I feel like has a lot of like brown and orange tones going on with it. This one is definitely a little more of that bluish green kind of coloration through a lot of it. Mostly with just the extra lighting, I think, not even really just the props or anything specific, but everything looks like it's more actually in a bayou and more wet, which, I mean, I guess the Tampa ones are supposed to have been kicked out of the bayou, so that makes sense, right? But really nicely themed. The costumes look really cool. Going around the park counterclockwise, it kind of starts off with more voodoo huts and stuff, and then as you kind of pass through the area, you end up in this section where it is a lot of people hiding in the sides of the bushes in those like ghillie suits, which is something I didn't get a lot of in Tampa this year, which was usually a staple of them. So it was kind of cool to have a return of more of that, and they were hidden deep into those bushes this time. I feel like normally you could look and see the actors hiding on the side of the paths, but these guys were committing and like going real deep in there to hide, and then like someone would just bust out of the woods, or the planters, not the woods, but it felt like the woods when it got dark, and just run up on people and scare the crap out of them. And I think that was really effective. I was glad to see that returning. And there was a lot of them. Like, I think there was one section, there was like 4 or 5 of them within a very short path. So like, you know, one would jump out at somebody like, okay, well that one's occupied, and you feel like more safe walking forward. But then there's like 3 more ready to jump out at you. It's like velociraptors.
Inside out.
So this year they decided to open up more of the park for Howl-O-Scream. Last year was kind of just looking at the map, it'd be like the right side of the map. This time they opened up the full loop. I don't know if that was because they had to repurpose certain areas. I believe they are building like a new roller coaster or something. So I don't know if they lost some of their real estate to do things in or what. So last year, like this loop that you go on would kind of lead you to a dead end, kind of around where the Mako coaster is. That would basically be the end of the loop, and you'd have to turn back and walk through, which kind of made last year's path a little inefficient because you did have to do a lot of backtracking depending on where you were going. You couldn't just walk in circles like you can at a lot of these theme park haunts. So this year that was changed. So this begins the first of the new scare zones, and this one is Terrors of the Deep. Wasn't particularly impressed with this one. It kind of looked like it was supposed to be like some Roman ruins that had been sunken underwater. There was like a Roman soldier looking guy, but he was kind of ghostly looking. Honestly, I'm not sure if they were supposed to be people or statues that were coming to life or something. There are some kind of like ruined structures around as well. There are a couple like sea creature themed scare actors walking around. The coolest of them being somebody who had this like moray eel mask that looked really neat. There's also another little scare area that I only saw go off once, but it was like a frame with like a mirror in it. And then there'd be a thing where it'd be like lit from behind. You'd see a person inside screaming. And I saw it happen once. I don't think I caught it on film. And then I sat there and kind of waited for it to go off again a couple other times, and it never seemed to. So I don't know if that was just the actor wasn't in there at the time that I came back, or I don't know what triggers that, but I was waiting for it and was not getting it.
Walking that way, I was like, look at the moose. Sorry.
The next scare zone is one that you kind of have to go through to get to the house over in this section, as far as I'm aware. This is called Cargo Carnage. This one was actually really cool. It kind of had a big facade going into it of like some stacked cargo crates. And I think they were supposed to be like demons, basically, trying to like take your soul or seduce you or whatever inside this area. So yeah, kind of sexy demons beckoning you into this area. And a lot of it was just themed of like shipping containers and stuff strewn about. I think there's some dead bodies in some of them. Kind of a cool concept. I don't know exactly what demons have to do with shipping, but it worked. Watching back through my footage while editing this, I now realize that I think they were supposed to be vampires, and the whole cargo thing was like transporting their coffins. I don't know why my brain was just saying demons, but yeah, vampires makes a lot more sense. The next house back in this area is Blood Beckoning. I am reading the description on the website now, and I don't remember any of what they're talking about being part of the house. Like, you go into the facade of a bookstore, and it actually did a really nice job like making this windy bookstore that you go through. A lot of like static props in there, once again to kind of light on the scare actors. Almost making it creepier in some parts because there were such large areas and it wasn't that super dark of some of those first houses. So you kind of be going through these big, decently lit stretches with nobody there. I'm like, well, surely there must be a scare actor here. So it almost became more like anticipation, waiting for them to pop up. And I'm trying to remember, this thing kind of puts you through a lot of different areas. I remember there being like a sewer system at one point, and I think you end up actually going back outside in points of it, and kind of walking through different, like, almost like city streets or camp areas. I think they're supposed to be like city streets, but like people camping out on them. I don't know, the description says something about beauty comes at a price and you're the one paying. I don't remember anything of any kind of character that was trying to like steal people's beauty. Like, I assume it's supposed to be like an Elizabeth Bathory kind of thing. I don't remember anything like that going on in this house. I think it was probably my favorite house of the night, but as you can see, these things left very little impression on me overall. So this is kind of going to be a weird video. So to get out of that house, I believe you had to go back through the cargo scare zone, and then the next scare zone is Cutthroat Cove, which is their pirate themed one. They had one last year as well, but this was over by Mako in kind of a big like roundabout area. This is more spread out, maybe a little too spread out. I think it honestly kind of felt like it was a bit disjointed. Like, you'd have some scare actor bits, and then you'd have empty area, then you'd be into some more displays. And honestly, by this point, I was so underwhelmed with everything going on, I just kind of breezed through this. I just wasn't feeling it, and I just kind of just walked. And I don't know if I've ever been in that that mood at a haunt before. Like, you know, usually I'm there to enjoy it, and I want to enjoy it. I want to be startled, scared, whatever by things. I want to enjoy the set decoration. I want to enjoy the costumes. But I was just kind of done at this point, and I was at the point where people trying to scare me was annoying me more than it was doing anything else. So when I was through that, there is basically a bridge that goes back across the middle of the park to lead you back to the other side of the loop. And that was actually kind of cool. They had pirate flags on it. There was a heavy breeze blowing that night, so the flags were whipping. And it was kind of like a nice, enjoyable walk back to the rest of the carnage. I then did the two other houses over in this area. The first one was Beneath the Ice, another returning house. I feel like it was virtually the same as last year. Once again, a lot fewer scare actors in it, it felt like, than there should have been. A lot of areas where it was just kind of walking through. The whole thing is supposed to be like the base part of that outside scare zone that's the Arctic theme. So it's a lot of like interior rooms and things. The one part in it I will give is that somebody had like I think it was like a severed arm on a string, which I think I've seen at other Howl-O-Scream events, but I don't think I've ever seen it in a house, so having somebody throw a limb at me in a house was kind of a good little jump. The sets are pretty cool, pretty well done, but there were a lot of areas where it's like they have like things staggered, you know, one over the other, so like you're walking down a path, you kind of have to zigzag through it, and there's obviously areas where people like hide behind and jump out, and they were like long stretches where nobody was there, and not in like a suspenseful way, but just in it feels like something should be happening and nothing is, and I'm just walking down a hallway. And then some of the scares that did come through, this was a little later in the night. So like where the first ones I was going by myself when I was by myself. These ones, they were usually sending me first with a couple other people behind me. And for whatever reason in this house, I wasn't like speed walking through this thing, but all the scares were happening to the people behind me. It's like the scare actors weren't ready for a person to come through and they would see me, and then by the time they jumped out, I was past them and they were scaring the people behind me. Either that or they just looked more scarable. Maybe by this point I was just looked like somebody was unimpressed with what was going on and they just didn't even bother, which made me even less impressed. And then the last house, which is technically the first one you run into when you come into the event, Siren of the Seas. Last year was like a hotel theme. This time they kept a lot of elements of that house, but themed it to a cruise ship. And I really think they should have kept it as the house or the hotel or whatever, because like elements they tried to do to make it the sea theme kind of fell flat. You walk into like a reception area in the beginning, and there is supposed to be like a staircase in the middle of the cruise ship, like a grand hallway thing of this cruise ship off to the side, but it's clearly like a cardboard facade, and it doesn't have enough room to give the illusion of depth. Like it was so close to you that it didn't have the space to give you that forced perspective, and it just looked cheap. And a lot of it, I think you're going through various bits of the ship. There's like sections where it's like a bedroom and there's people kind of hiding in some parts of it. I think this is the one that had like a laundry room. I think there was a bathroom in it as well. There were some more like communal areas. There were some areas where like display cases. There's an area last year where I think you actually took one of two different paths through. This time they actually just kind of ran you, like, it was weird. Like you could have kept walking forward, but instead they make you turn left, go through this like U on the side, and then come back out and go. It feels weird they couldn't just put a wall there to make it a continuous thing, that they had to have this weird option. The only thing I could think of is maybe it was too tight going through that U that you couldn't fit like a wheelchair or something through, and that's why they had to adjust it. Not entirely sure, to be honest. But another in a long list of houses that were kind of lackluster for me. So at this point of the night, I was pretty bummed. I was kind of just over it. But before I left, I wanted to go on Infinity Falls. I had gotten to go the year previous. It had been my first time ever riding that ride. I really enjoyed it, but it was shut down early in the night last year because of the storms, and then it closed way before the park closed for the night for some reason. And I went on it. And here we go. Ah, here it comes. It's just like the ride's peeing on you. Alright, we're getting on the lift. Which way am I going? Shit. Oh no. Oh, I'm going over backwards.
here we go. Yeah. Oh, that's so cool.
And then I went on it again.
Yeah, it's gonna be that. Oh shit, we got an elevator.
What is that doing?
It picks you up.
No fucking way. I thought we were gonna go through like this, like I was gonna turn it.
Nah, it just came down.
Does that side get wet more or this side?
I'm not sure. It always seems to put me going down backwards. Oh shit, you are going backwards first. Remember when I told you to ride? Look, it's cold. Oh, damn it. Got him.
And then I went on it again after that. And honestly, that was the most fun I had all night, is going on that ride. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. But it was definitely the highlight of the night for me. By the time I got off of it, there was literally, it felt like a quarter-inch of standing water inside my shoes, which was kind of gross. And did make walking back to the front of the park a bit of a pain. But that was my own fault. And knowing that I had at least a 2-hour drive back home, I did actually spring to use their weird dryer pods to try to dry myself off a little bit. I don't normally do the shows at these events, and I definitely didn't go into any of the sit-down shows. But in that front kind of hub where they have Beneath the Ice, they have it set up, same like they did last year for the Sirens song performance, which is a bunch of stages in this kind of round area where the different sirens that are almost the icons of this event, if you want to use that term, perform. I believe last year the houses all had a siren assigned to them. I think that was part of the cool thing, is that it was kind of themed off of each. There was like one in the vines, there's one in the ice. I think this year the ice one is the only one I saw, or at least recognized that it was supposed to be a siren because she was up on like a stage and it was pretty obvious what it was. I liked that theme last time. I thought it was cool to kind of weave a mythology between all these houses and connect them back to these characters. And if they did do that this year, it was not clear, and I wish it had been more obvious. But this performance is kind of, you know, just a dance performance, but it was pretty cool. I like that it is in the round, so like you might have a good seat for one performance, but like the other ones are happening way on the other side of the thing. They have plants in the audience that they grab and bring up on stage as like sacrifices and stuff. And the fact that you don't have to like go into a theater for it, that it's just in the pathway, I think that's kind of cool. It probably causes some congestion in that area, so if you are trying to get from the front of the park to the back, it may cause some issues, but I think it ended up being pretty cool. It wasn't a super long show either, and they play it like once an hour. So after that, I headed out. That was pretty much all I wanted to do. I didn't do any of the houses a second time. I didn't feel like any of them were good enough that I wanted to spend time doing them again. Which is actually funny, because the Siren of the Seas house leads you back out to that front hub section where they hold you in the beginning, which is also the exit of the event. And last year I had taken that path to get out because, you know, why walk back through a scare zone where you could walk through a house? And this time I was just so done, I just went back through the scare zones and didn't bother. Saying it now, I'm like, I feel like I didn't give this thing a fair chance, but at the time I was just doing the thing that I wanted to do because I was just done. I was over it. So I feel like this is going to be one where I have a better time ranking the scare zones than I do the houses, because the houses were kind of meh all across the board. But for the houses, I will say number 5, I'll give to Deadly Vines. Number 4, I'll give to Captain's Revenge, even though these two are interchangeable because I felt like they were the same damn house, just one was Vines, one was Pirates. Neither being subjects that get me super excited anyway. Then I'll say Siren of the Seas, a little bit better, but it felt like it kind of fell flat in certain parts. Then Beneath the Ice, I think if it had been populated more, it would have been great. And then Blood Beckoning, it was the most unique out of any of them at least, and it had a lot of different things going on at least, so I can give it that. So honestly, I don't feel like I can count Sea of Fear, the first kind of hub area, scare zone, as a real scare zone. It just feels like its own thing. So I'm not going to include that in the rankings. So number 6, I'm going to say Cutthroat Cove. I like where some of these houses and the scare zones are tied together, but this area, it's just so much space between the two. They don't feel connected, and it really just kind of came off as too much pirates in one event. And like I said, it was really spaced out in and of itself, so that kind of like detracted from it a bit. Number 5, Terrors of the Deep. I like the Moray Eel mask. The rest of it was kind of nothing to write home about. I think they could have done something much cooler with the concept. Number 4, Deadly Ambush. I still like this area, but it just felt underpopulated again. I felt like the actors weren't doing as cool things as they did the previous year, so I kind of would have enjoyed a better version of this like there was last year. And I think that may just be the luck of the draw on my part. I think if I'd gone on a different night, it could have been ranked higher. Number 3, I will say Witchcraft Bayou. Nicely themed. I like the ghillie suit people. Once again, very similar to what they've done last year, but that's okay. Number 2, Carnage Cargo. I had fun with this one. I liked the theming of it. I liked how it looked. I like the scare actors in it. Still don't really see how the theme really meshes together, but that's fine. And then number 1, I'll give to Frozen Terror. I think the actors here did a really good job. They were creepy. They had a lot to do, it seems. I think the layout of it, because it is kind of a winding path, actually does help it as well, because it kind of obscures different parts but leaves things close together. I think it works really well. I really like that opening scare zone. So yeah, that was my experience. I feel crummy giving like a negative review of this thing, but I think, like I said, I think part of it was on me. Part of it may have also just been that I had high expectations from how much I loved it last year. That maybe some things were exactly the same, and the fact that they were the same just made me not appreciate them as much as I did last year when they were new. And it's always been a double-edged sword with these Howl-O-Scream events. I felt the same way at Busch Gardens, where I've gone back a second time and like, oh, I've seen this before. It's kind of boring. But then, like other years, I'll go and be like, oh yeah, they brought it back. I want to go on that again. I want to do that again. This is great. And I think having gone to the Tampa one the week prior and having such a good time, my expectations were probably higher than they should have been, just because of that as well. So I don't know, not that they're blameless for anything, but also maybe I'm just causing my own problems here, I guess. Totally possible. But yeah, if you went out to this event this year, let me know in the comments how you liked it. Let me know if I'm alone or if you felt the same way. I'm not sure if this is going to be my last haunt for the year. There's 2 more I'd like to hit, but I don't know if I'm going to have time to do that. So I guess we will see, and I'll see you in the next video. Later.